Welcome to Nocturnal Transmissions, the fortnightly podcast that brings you dark tales, both old and new, performed by your humble narrator, Kristin Holland. Now brought to you by the newly launched Spectre Vision Radio podcast network. Who are they, you ask? Well, Spectre Vision is a horror-focused production banner run by Elijah Wood, Daniel Noah, and Lawrence Ingley. They are the folks behind Panos Cosmatos' Nicolas Cage-helmed, acid-fueled, psychedelic, brain-melting metal band album cover of a movie, Mandy, amongst others. And now they have expanded their operation, as it were, to embrace their collective love of podcasts by launching a bespoke podcast network, which, in their words, is at the intersection between the arts and the uncanny, featuring a tapestry of shows exploring creativity, the esoteric, and the unknown. A community for creators and fans vibrating around common curiosities, shared interests, and persistent passions. What fun. We accepted their invitation to enter Spectre Vision Radio's weird embrace, in the hope that we might find more of the strange folk out there who enjoy the kind of thing we do, and in the belief that this will allow us to introduce you, gentle listeners, to more of what you like. It's all new and untested and exciting. Let's see where it leads us. Anyway, we'll have more to say about all this down the track. Right now, we have a story to get to. Last episode, you may recall, we shared something old. This episode, we go new and oh so topical with David Winchester's The Shelf Life of Man. Looking back on it, Marcus should have kept his mouth shut. Even after all this time, he could still see Mr. Abrams' eyes widening with interest as Marcus had detailed the plugins, apps, and the subscriptions that practically ran his department. "You just tell it what to do and it does it for you, sir," he'd crowed, fueled by the beers they'd shared as part of the team-building event. If he'd instead just thanked the man for noticing his hard work and turned the conversation to football or grilling, he'd still have a job. Oh, hell, I'd probably have gotten a raise, he thought bitterly. Instead, he'd gushed about AI for a few minutes and given the man ideas. I mean, why wouldn't he share something so cool with the man who decided when he was getting promoted? It showed what a forward thinker Marcus was. You just told it what to do, and it did it for you. Even if the results weren't perfect, they were usually good enough. He used one plugin to polish his emails, another app to identify anomalies in budget spreadsheets, and a subscription site to handle recruiting. By the time he was done, he'd practically automated his job out of existence. "Hell," he bragged, "you can even have the computer do the interview and send you the recording." In the morning, he blamed the beer, but 3 months later, he was still laid off, and his boss was promoted thanks to the man's new efficiency initiative. Marcus was less than happy about the way things had played out, so he did what any well-balanced, rational person would have done in his place. He sent his boss's boss a nice, well-thought-out email explaining that there was no need to pay his regional managers when AI could handle those tasks, too. Do unto others. Right. The layoff came with severance, at least, so Marcus thought he'd take some time to pursue his passions. But that was pointless now, too. I mean, why learn to paint when a program could make something far prettier than he was able in seconds? It didn't escape his notice that many of those pictures contained creepy details and inhuman mistakes, but no one cared. As long as the hands had less than 7 fingers, the eyes of the average person simply glossed over those mistakes. More often than not, he found his older relatives sharing things on social media that were obviously fake. Those were hardly the only details that the machines got wrong. No one cared that the cereal boxes at the grocery store were crooked now. After getting fired from the plant, he was never going to buy another box of Crispy Flakes, of course. Still, he had to eat something, and on every trip down aisle 3, those leaning white cereal boxes mocked him. After that, he began to spiral. He was still on unemployment, so it didn't really matter what he filled his days with, so long as they stayed full enough that he didn't think about the damn machines. But he couldn't escape them. He played shooters online until he got tired of getting killed by kids half his age with aim bots. After that, he watched daytime TV, but it was filled with nothing but conversations about how exciting it was that AI would change everything. Oh, we'll see how you like it when they replace you too, motherfuckers. He spat, toasting his TV with his beer. Replacing all of these well-paid talking heads with digital VTubers and inane chatbots would be the easiest thing in the world. No one would even notice the difference as long as there were enough pretty colors and flashing lights. Marcus rarely left his house at this stage, and eventually he barely even left his bed. Still, he always had to go grocery shopping, and one day, while walking down the cereal aisle in his bathrobe, he saw someone familiar. Jeff had been one of his foremen. And even if they'd butted heads more than a little back then, he was one of the few people in the world that Marcus wanted to talk to right now. "Oh, hey, man, long time no see," Marcus said, suddenly aware of how unused to being cheerful he was now. "How've you been?" "Oh, you know, same old," Jeff said, but neither of them really meant it. They talked for a bit, and both of them pretended everything was fine, until Marcus casually commented on how crooked the cereal boxes were getting. That opened the floodgates of truth, and for almost an hour the two recently unemployed men stood there in aisle 3, talking about just how ugly things had gotten. "Oh, it's getting really bad," Jeff told Marcus. "It was even before they laid off most of the guys with seniority. Tommy, Luke, even Rich is gone now." "Rich too? Oh, Christ," Marcus commiserated. "His wife is still sick, isn't she?" "Now, why would they care about any of that?" Jeff answered, shaking his head in disgust. "Used to be you needed guys who knew the machines, guys with an eye for the paper. Now, they automated the whole process. You don't need knowledgeable guys anymore, do you? Just a few warm bodies to move shit around, and a guy on call in case something breaks. That's pretty much it." Marcus felt the knife twist with every word, since he was the one who had gotten this ball rolling, even if it was by accident. He didn't say that, though. Instead, he listened. Eventually, they'd both vented enough and vowed to keep in touch as they said their goodbyes. But Marcus knew they wouldn't. The last thing either of them wanted to see was a reminder of how far they'd fallen. Still, as the weeks passed, he couldn't get the exchange out of his head. Even though he knew it was a terrible idea, Marcus knew he'd never be at peace until he went to see the place again for himself. The thought lingered, and days later, when he showed up at the plant, he was somewhere between drunk and hammered. The sane, sober part of his mind that knew this was a bad idea reminded him that he was just here to look around and see how they'd completely ruined his life. That seemed unlikely, though, since the other part of him had brought a lighter, just in case. After all, bad things could happen to unattended machinery in a building full of paper products. Marcus pulled the hoodie around his neck, even as he reminded himself that the cameras on the loading docks had been broken since forever. According to Jeff, there weren't too many people left to see him now either. While even a skeleton crew would catch him if he stayed too long, they were unlikely to notice a quick peek inside. Right? He couldn't have been more wrong. The building was a ghost town, and it quickly became apparent why. Everything had been automated. It wasn't just the pulpers and the presses that no longer needed an operator. Now every machine was cranking away on its own, and industrial robots that looked like boxes on wheels were shuttling supplies back and forth as they loaded and unloaded different machines. Jesus, he whispered, watching with dismay as he realized they hadn't just automated him and his guys out of a job. They'd done it to everyone. Practically the whole company was robots now, all the way down. Marcus was in shock as he looked around the operation. The whole thing had become a strange industrial ballet. Machines with no idea what they were doing or why. What the hell did these assets think they were doing? He yelled in the lonely, cavernous room. You can't just let all these things just run. They need to be checked and inspected. It was easy to see the problem. The calibrations were just a little off, and even though they were still in tolerance at every step, the mistakes added up. The presses made the sheets a little too long, and the cutter stamped them unevenly, making it worse instead of being tuned to correct the error. By the time the sheet reached the end, it was all wrong. He watched the same set of machines that he and Jeff had spent months getting into perfect alignment, shut down briefly, go through a self-calibration cycle, and then start back up to make the same mistakes. It would have been unacceptable when humans had been at the wheel, but now it was good, just because the little sequence of green lights said so. Oh, that's some bullshit right there, he muttered, slurring slightly as he walked over to the fancy white box that held the PLCs, deciding that he wanted to see if they worked any better with a little alcohol inside them. If they're making shit like that, I might as well give them an excuse. He'd had to fire plenty of guys for working drunk over the years. Maybe he'd see if the same rule applied to the machines that had replaced them. A few steps from his goal, though, he had to jump out of the way as a bot carrying a whole pallet of white Crispy Flakes boxes hurtled by. "There she blows!" he said exaggeratedly, not caring how much he slurred his words. "Me white whale at last." Marcus followed the bot across the floor, shouting abuse at it as it trundled toward the lift with its burden. It had reminded him why he was here in the first place. He was going to make sure that all this very expensive hardware that couldn't evacuate went up in smoke. Maybe then the next company would think twice before downsizing to 0. And if he was going to start a fire, he might as well do it where they stored the tens of thousands of cereal boxes ready for shipment. He waited just long enough for the bot to stop moving briefly, and then he climbed up on top of the banded pallet and sat Indian style, drinking away as the load was slowly lifted and slid onto a warehouse-bound conveyor belt. It was a good plan, and he enjoyed the view from several feet above the work floor, which he would never have seen while obeying OSHA's endless rules. He wasn't even wearing a hard hat, which turned out to be an important detail when an automated gantry crane swung across the room from his blind side, hitting Marcus with enough force to knock him from his perch. His fall gave him just enough time to appreciate the pain and understand which machine he was falling towards. Then he felt agony as his ribs impacted the pulper's intake manifold. He barely had time to scream as the churning mechanism crushed his feet and dragged him deeper into the depths of the machine. He died, overwhelmed by the smell of damp paper and barely able to hear his own screams over the sound of the machine. By the time the crimson slurry that was his mortal remains had been converted into thin pieces of bleached cardboard, now drying, there was nothing left of him but his dental work, which was filtered out by the machine. He'd died as he'd lived, becoming no more than raw materials for the very process that had rendered his life meaningless. No one noticed Marcus's disappearance except for a few of his online friends. The digital echoes of his life faded into the static of the internet, and his absence went unnoticed by the very systems he'd once embraced. It was only when his rent was 3 months past due and a sheriff's deputy served an eviction notice on his empty apartment that a missing persons report was filed, months after his gruesome demise. By then, of course, he'd never be found. Marcus's remains had been spread throughout the country in the form of 42,000 identical cardboard boxes that each proclaimed the greatness of Tasty Bits and Crunchy Flakes cereal. It was a silent, ironic monument to his forgotten existence.
Is it just me, or are these boxes getting even worse than usual?
Marcia asked her co-worker while they stocked the shelves on aisle 3.
Huh? What do you mean?
Billy asked, taking out his headphones.
Shit looks like it always does. Cheap cardboard filled with sugar cardboard. Nothing to write home about. I mean, Crispy Flakes has always been shit, she conceded. But look, they don't even sit flat anymore, and the colors are kind of off.
She held out a box. Its normal, cool white color was now tinged with sickly splotches of beige and puce. And even the familiar logo was slightly blurred. The way the ink had run looked almost like a blood stain, and it creeped around.
Texture's a bit off,
he agreed, rubbing his hand along the rippled front of the box before handing it back.
Probably just more cost-cutting. Makes you wonder what they're doing to the actual food, if they're skimping on the packaging, huh? Oh, gross, Billy, gross, she said with disgust. I don't even want to think about that. I wouldn't be able to come to work anymore if I thought about what goes into all this stuff.
Don't worry about it. AI will fix all this shit. He chuckled, putting his headphones back on. By the time we finish paying off our student loans, robots will be doing everything, like Star Trek, you know. Marcia didn't reply. Instead, her gaze lingered on the slightly misshapen cereal box in her hand before putting it back down on the shelf. Computers doing everything for you sounded nice and everything. What were the odds she'd ever actually finish paying off her communications degree working at a place like this? In this economy, those odds seemed almost as crooked as some of these cereal boxes. The Shelf Life of Man by David Winchester. A former submariner and van dweller, David currently resides in Bavaria with his wife. He's best known for his ongoing dark fantasy web novels on Royal Road. His website, caffeineforge.com, offers further details on this and his other numerous ongoing projects. Links are provided in the featured authors section of our website, nocturnaltransmissions.com.au. This transmission was transmitted by Nocturnal Transmissions, the fortnightly podcast that brings you dark tales, both old and new. If you're a new listener, we encourage you to indulge in our back catalogue, where you'll find all manner of dark matter. No matter what your tastes, we believe you'll find something to love, something to hate, and all manner of things in between back there. And if, like us, you believe that too much is barely enough, you'll find even more Nocturnal Transmissions on our Patreon channel. Just subscribe at the level that suits your budget and enjoy all the additional dread and wretchedness we offer there. And not only that, you'll also enjoy the warm feeling of knowing you're helping to keep the dark flame alive. Speaking of which, this episode was made possible thanks in no small part to the generous assistance of our beloved Tenders of the Flame, our Patreon subscribers. We would like to extend an extra big thank you to those most dedicated amongst our ranks, our esteemed cohorts: Daniel Kamienkowski, Jimmy Mack, Rachel Brown, David Weaver, Andy Shammy, Heathen Soul, Evan Dooley, Wayne Prince, Kel Wielden, Jerry Taylor, Daniel Clanton, Tim Howard, Drenny, Robert Troy Hampton Peterson, Boole Swivney, Amanda Moore, Fangora Brown, Rebecca Gates, Johnny Kelly, Tippy Polo, Alex Brewers, Crunchy Kirby, and Adam. All non-public domain stories are featured with the permission of the authors. All voices and production are concocted by Kristin Holland. Until next time, as always, watch the skies, fear the dark, and don't trust anyone, especially yourself. Good night, gentle listener.
I'll see you in the morning. Good night, good night. I'll see you with the dawning. Sunshine will change the night to day. Shadows will all be chased away.